For example, robot soldiers. No, robot soldiers is a completely Ahrimanic idea. You just have a machine with a gun that is guarding something or even fighting, who of course does not know or doesn't have in any way the concept of mercy or pity or so, which is just impossible. It can't have it. And when people think that it's just possible to shift that to a machine that doesn't have these deeply humanic features, then the red alarm bulbs should go on.
Hej och välkomna till Folkets Radio. Welcome to the People's Radio. Today with Frank Burdich, spiritual researcher and former Waldorf teacher, and Thomas Mayer, author, meditation teacher, and civil rights activist. Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So you're both from Germany and both part of the Antroposophy movement and the teachings of Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner died in 1925. That was 100 years ago. An Austrian philosopher, author, spiritual teacher. He founded the Waldorf schools and the Antroposophy movement, which is sometimes referred to as an esoteric form of Christianity. But how are his ideas and his prophecies relevant today in order to understand the challenge humanity is facing from transhumanism, artificial intelligence? So this is the topic we're going to discuss today. But before we go there, perhaps you can tell us a bit about yourselves, about your background, and how you became interested and devoted to the ideas of anthroposophy. Frank, perhaps you can begin.
Yeah. Well, so I studied chemistry and biology, and in my way of thinking, I was completely materialistic. So I always thought the world of molecules, that this is the world that is relevant for the existence of the world. And but because of illness reasons, someone recommended to go to a classical homeopathist. I had no idea what that was, but I just trusted this person. Went there and I saw, well, something happens with me. And so I was healed, and without having any idea what that was. And when I read about homeopathy, I understood. So my beloved molecules, they don't play a role, and so I had to find something that includes the way of thinking that not everything is depending on molecules. And so maybe intuitively I found more than 30 years ago already Antroposophy, and I began to read Rudolf Steiner. And then I saw also, well, I'm somehow connected with that because Rudolf Steiner is, of course, speaking out of a clairvoyant perspective. And I saw already in student times, I have a little glimpse of that in my hand. I have abilities to follow that, to understand that, to see that. And so I went on a spiritual path. So as Steiner described that, and developed capacities to have a super sensible view on the world. And so this is out of perspective, out of that I'm speaking today.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Thomas?
Yeah, when I was 15 years old, it's a long time ago. So I came to the book Knowledge of the Higher World. That's a book about how to get abilities to perceive the supersensible world. And that was really a revolution for me, because I understood it's possible that I can perceive spiritual beings by myself. I have to train myself. It's not a question of believing. And the nature science I was also quite deeply in, but I get depressive from this stuff, from this approach. It's total to live in a total senseless world. It's hard. So since I read this book, knowledge of the higher world, I started to train myself, and then there's a lot of steps, and in the end, yeah, I'm now meditation teacher and spiritual researcher since a lot of years. So, and the main point is that in anthroposophy, it's not a question of believing. That is important to understand. It's not a religion. It's not a question of believing. It's an empirical science. We want to, we have to really to look and to perceive what is going on in the spiritual levels, in the ether world, in the astral world, in the spiritual world, and we want to perceive the being there. It's not and then after perceiving, of course, we can believing what I have perceived. That's of course one part, but the believing, it's not. We do not start with believing.
No.
It's a science that is important, and so it's totally open, and it's also possible to understand all other spiritual paths and also all religions all around the world. I can understand it with anthroposophy because I have the possibility to follow with whom do they communicate, what are they doing. I have the possibility to understand it.
When you can say, so there's only one spiritual world existing, and all the different religions and cultures are just valuing those beings differently and naming them differently. And so which means the possibility to have a super sensible view on that. You can just determine what is there and what effect do this being have on ourselves.
Yes, so that's very important also. You don't have to be a follower of Christianity or even use these notions like Christ consciousness in order to talk about same mystical experience. So a Native American has his vocabulary, and Aborigine has his vocabulary, and different mystical traditions have different names, but it's as you say, it's an experience. It's not a belief system.
Yeah, when I've been to Cambodia and looking super sensible people there, I saw that people have averagely much stronger Christ connections than we have, but they would never call it like that. They have different gods who are constituting universal love.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. My mother was also actually a devoted scholar of Rudolf Steiner, and she put me and my brother in a Waldorf school. And back then, I didn't understand why Waldorf schools and anthroposophy was so demonized by mainstream society, in particular by certain influential lobby groups who is also attacking alternative medicine. So why is that? Why has the anthroposophy movement been so attacked, would you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, the anthroposophic movement with biodynamic agriculture, with all the medicine, is in every subject completely controversial to what the mainstream society has. I mean, in the pharmacy, it's all about molecules. And in the anthroposophy, you have the effect of plants or whatever. So this is also a medicine that is compared to what the industry of the pharmacological research provides absolutely cheap. So out of the industrial perspective, homeopathy is not interesting, or even bringing the belief in what is important in our normal society in danger. Also in agriculture, it's all about effectivity. It's about selling what is it? Artificial fertilizers. That's the word.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And you have in the farming, you have something that is where something is slow, where something is where we are dedicated for caring for the animals, and so it just takes more time, and this is somehow something that is not absolutely not modern. I've been a teacher. I have a normal teacher education of the German gymnasium, but after a few months there, I saw that's not what I want. It's not about the pupil and his development. It's about how to bring all the classical knowledge as quick as possible into the the pupil's mind, and in spite of pedagogy with all that art and handcraft, is a slow pedagogy. And so this is not something that is wanted in the society. Maybe you can connect to that on a...
Yeah, of course. It's a counterpart to the transhumanistic world religion who tries to take over everything. And anthroposophy is really the counterpart of it. And so we had a lot of enemies. And the demonizing is quite silly because they it's only throwing with something. Throwing with snowballs to us, but it does not, but they do not normally, they do not understand anything of what anthroposophy is. But if you do not get a real resistance, you have done something wrong.
Yeah, that's true. And also, as Frank was saying, I mean, you can see it. One way of understanding why they are attacked is for commercial interest, that they are not promoting this commercial agriculture, for instance. But it's also, as you say, it runs deeper. When we're going to come into this notion of transhumanism, it is sort of like this. It's like a counter culture towards the transhumanist view on what it is to be a human being and to be alive. So as I said, my mother, she was into anthroposophy, and she left behind many books by Rudolf Steiner. And I have to say that these books are really not user-friendly. It's extremely complicated to read him in original. So it's very useful to have you as a guide. I really appreciate that. So before we go into more detail, perhaps I can just begin with a very general question. You mentioned something already, but the main characteristics of his prophecies and ideas and why they are so relevant for us today.
Yeah, for me, the core of anthroposophy is that, as Thomas already said, you don't have to believe in anything. When I speak with pupils about, sometimes I'm in schools and speaking about what I'm doing, and the people ask me, yeah, do you believe in angels? And I have to say, no, I don't believe in angels. I see them, and so I don't have to believe anymore. And this is the core of what we can do with anthroposophy. Rudolf Steiner spoke 350 books about his insights of his supersensory research, which you can study, which you can learn about how things maybe are, but the important things that he gave a path, and that provides a possibility for everyone to achieve the possibilities of getting to know something about the supersensible worlds. And this is the core of that the human being can develop himself, so to say, on a higher level, to be able to see that, but also on a higher level to help the earth for a further development. And this is something out of a supersensory perspective, which is dangerous for counter forces, for transhumanistic forces. They don't want the human being to develop. They don't want the earth to be developed further. They want to stop the human being. And anthroposophy gives the possibility to break through these things, and maybe so much.
Yeah. So super sensible, just to explain this word for somebody who doesn't know it, it sort of is to see what is the unseen, sort of the aura and the etheric body of a plant, for instance. This is the sort of, and you say angels. This is what is referred to as super sensible. Yeah.
Another word would be, we usually say super sensible, but super sensory, for example, would be also maybe more common word. So,
okay, very good.
Yeah, and Rudolf Steiner, so Rudolf Steiner's approach was to create a comprehensive foundation for spiritual research in countless fields. And he wanted really to start a new spiritual science to overcome the materialistic minds. That was his main approach, but he also had a deep understanding for the materialistic forces. And yeah, you ask what he is saying about the future. He's saying a lot about the future. So here is one quote. It's quite interesting. It's from 1916 from Rudolf Steiner, and he said very shortly, when we will have written the year 2000, we are now after 2000, there will come from America a kind of prohibition against all thinking, a sort of law which will have the aim of suppressing all individual thinking. So it's quite interesting because we really can experience this pressure of mainstream media, of propaganda, and also this attacks to our individual thinking. We will speak. I think we will speak further about these attacks, because these attacks are quite raffinate. They come with 5G. They come with televisions. They come with also with all online products. But yeah, it's quite interesting. He said it's not totally forbidden, but it's a kind of prohibition against individual thinking. He really saw what this materialistic approach will lead us.
Yeah. I remember when I was a pupil of Waldorf school, sometimes we would curse that, the pupils of other schools, they got to watch TV, and for us, TV was no good. And they were not so good at communicating to us why we shouldn't watch TV. It was sort of a little bit dogmatic in that sense in this school. But returning to the topic, this is a recent book. It's called The Electronic Doppelganger, and it's based on a lecture by Rudolf Steiner. And we can go into this concept of doppelganger later, but electricity is a central part of what Steiner sort of talks about when he does his prophecies and when he talks about these attacks from different realms and so on. So perhaps electricity is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Shall I begin?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, when we look super sensibly on the things that you can't see, on something that is electric, in the easiest way, a copper wire. So without electricity, and you switch it on, and then you suddenly have this electricity in the wire. There is a deep changing in how the whole thing is constituted. I try to avoid being too abstract, but when we do this on seminars, for example, with participants, just to say, to feel in, no? You need not to see something super sensible, but its ability to feel, which is sufficient to get an impression of what happens. Then suddenly something is constricting, something feels a bit dark. And in fact, when we see that so to say the inner core that is constituting the copper to be existing on Earth, suddenly is becoming dark. And so, when we look on, we already spoke about gods and forces and so on, and then we see that specific forces somehow slide in, making this electricity happening in a way of consuming specific life forces. So they take a specific life force, which we call the light ether, out of the surrounding. It goes into the wire and then is somehow changed into the electricity. And what is important, that on the one hand, it's reducing the life forces quality in the surrounding, which everyone can feel when we're surrounded by electricity. It's a weakening effect. And on the other hand, there is something which is, so to say, above. So there are forces that want that. And so this is a specific force. I think we can also speak more about that, which can be called a luciferic force, which is providing us to leave, to lose the contact to the earth, to come to a hallucinating world, to lose our realistic ideas, and which is also something that everyone can feel, which is also something we do on seminars. When you just take a little battery and keep it in your hands between two fingers, you feel suddenly that you look completely differently in the world. Suddenly you have an enthusiastic feeling, but which is not grounded by your heart feelings, not in your heart. It's a very strange feeling. But I tell you, I tell you that with a battery, because everyone is able to just test it. Take a battery between your fingers and look in the world, look on plants, look on other people, and you will see that there is a profound changing of your complete mindset. And this is something that is flooded through the whole earth in a specific way to bring us away from a clear thinking and feeling.
Mm-hmm. So the main point is you have to think that in every technology there are spiritual beings. Nothing is without spiritual beings. That is the main part. It's not only a materialistic, there's a materialistic, material happening, okay? That is the part, nature scientists can look on it, but as a spiritual scientist, we have to look on the spiritual levels, and everything has a spiritual level. That is important to understand. And so also in the electricity, there are luciferic beings inside, and Frank tried to explain it.
Yes. So two notions that are very, very central to Rudolf Steiner are the Luciferian, Lucifer, and Ahriman. They come from, I think, mythology, both these forces. And I would like to talk about their characteristics, especially Ahriman. Lucifer, you already mentioned, sometimes it's referred to as on the one hand, it's could have be religious, ecstatic feeling, but it's not really grounded in reality. So some people say it's the force behind the New Age movement, and sort of it brings people that are out of contact with the real world. But the Ahrimanic force is perhaps the most relevant, or I don't know, it's really reminiscent of what the Gnostics call the archons. And I know that the famous book by Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, the ring is a metaphor for materialism, and this main evil character, Sauron, is also modeled after Ahriman. So perhaps you could talk a bit about Lucifer, and especially about Ahriman. Who are they, and how would you describe them?
Yeah, I can try it, because it's really quite important to understand the Ahrimanic and the Luciferic beings, because they are the leading forces in our world. So if you want, you can easily remember Hollywood, Lucifer, Wall Street, Ahriman. So
Excellent.
you can easily remember it. Hollywood, Lucifer, Wall Street, Ahriman, and then you really understood as a quality of both. So and the Ahrimanic and also the Luciferic are fallen angels. So you angels who could not really follow the evolution of the world. In Christianity they are called fallen angels, and they are everywhere. And the Ahrimanic forces is to stop movement, coming together, and dark organizing structure by bureaucracy. But behind this approach, there are beings, spiritual beings, and we need Ahrimanic beings. But perhaps in social life, we need if we meet as a group, we need to understand what everyone has to do, and we need some rules, how to organize, how to come to decisions, and so on. But if then it's an healthy Ahriman. But if it goes too far and everything we only have bureaucracy, only have to follow rules, always give reports, and we only are living in a machine, then it's Ahriman out of balance.
Yeah.
And that is a problem. If there is a balance, if there is, Rudolf Steiner called it Christ in the middle, if there is love in the middle, the I power in the middle, then Ahriman could be helpful, and also Lucifer could be helpful. We need Lucifer for enthusiasm, for going forward, taking new initiative. But it always have to be balanced. And in our time, it's totally out of balance, and we are living in a materialistic world religion. In all universities, there are temples of Ahriman. But Ahriman is a spirit. He does not say, hello, I'm Ahriman. No, he works hidden.
Yeah.
That is important to understand.
And I think what is important for the person in the modern society is to notice that something is somehow strange, that something is somehow over the border. For example, robot soldiers. No, robot soldiers is a completely Ahrimanic idea. You just have a machine with a gun that is guarding something or even fighting, who of course does not know or doesn't have in any way the concept of mercy or pity or so, which is just impossible. It can't have it. And when people think that it's just possible to shift that to a machine that doesn't have these deeply humanic features, then the red alarm bulbs should go on. Or when you think, but you can have it at a court, a judge. You can replace the judge by a computer. So bank robbery with a gun, how many people were kidnapped, and so then it's calculating and says 7 years, 6 months prison or so. This would be a complete Ahrimanic idea, not considering human circumstances in a context.
Yeah, also same in medicine. They want to change that there is not a real doctor who is hearing and asking what is your and so on. There is no only you in future you only shall speak with a computer and then you get a result. So that is Ahriman out of control. With in this Ahrimanic world, we are losing our humanity. That is important to understand. We are only machines. We are nothing anymore without our heart and without our love, without our warmth. We lose our humanity, and that is the goal of Ahriman if he is not balanced.
So, if I'm not mistaken, Rudolf Steiner is supposed to have said as a prophecy, talking about our time, that Ahriman would inevitably incarnate in humanity, especially in the Western world.
Yes.
So what is this incarnation of Ahriman? We can come in more to the details later about the different technologies and so on, but how do you see this incarnation? Is it coming through technology?
Yeah, it's coming through technology, and it's quite interesting to read what Rudolf Steiner said about it. He gave several lectures in 1919, and he said that the preparing of the incarnation of Ahriman is a scientific materialism, an intellectual and cultural life driven by the economic forces. Yeah, we have it. It always is always only the question of money, not the question of culture, and the preservation of knowledge in libraries and today in electronic storage media. Yeah, we have it. The belief in the omnipotence of numbers and statistics. Yes, that's normal, and the focus of political parties and the establishment of a world government. Yeah, we have it. All we have it, and that is the preparation of the incarnation of Ahriman. But the incarnation of Ahriman, I think, in my view, you must understood that it's a lengthy process, and the Ahriman experience think step by step into our members of the human beings. And when Ahriman penetrates the eye, no, you can no longer experience it because you are absorbed by the outside world. You only are living in the outside world, and you forget that you are an eye with an inner space. That is when Ahriman is coming into your eye, and then it goes deeper, and then the Ahrimanic beings wails in our thinking, and then our thinking gets abstract. That it's we have in universities for a long time, and then the Ahrimanic beings thinks deeper in our feeling and also in our life forces. So that's, I think it's necessary to understand the incarnation of Ahriman. The incarnation of Ahriman, it's not only in one person, it's in the whole humanity, and it thinks deeper and deeper. And yeah, there is also the discussion with in the anthroposophic circles, and there is also the position that yes, incarnation of Ahriman is happened in the internet. That is the body of Ahriman today.
That's very important to understand that, because when Steiner speaks about the incarnation of Ahriman, many people think that must happen like the incarnation of Jesus Christ 2000 years ago. And so many people expect that we spiritual researchers point out a specific person and says, this is the incarnated Ahriman. But it's important for us to say, no, it's much more intelligent how Ahriman does it. It would be much too simple just to incarnate in one person. So there's an incarnation in many people who have key roles in our society and who bring in these Ahrimanic ideas. And so which means this is how of course everything is invented by people. And then there's a specific spiritual illumination that brings the people to have specific ideas. And so this is how Ahriman incarnates. And so to say, the Ahrimanic ideas, the Ahrimanic effects are incarnated then through our modern technology.
But important is to understand it's not a question of to get afraid of it. No, we should awaken of it. We should look, so is it? So is it also to recognize, perhaps my feeling, often my feelings are not my own feelings. I often manipulate it from the outside. That is Ahriman in our feeling. If we do not have our own feelings, if we have feelings from society, from the outside world, that is how is Ahriman penetrate our feeling. And if we get awakened of it and get clear of it, then we can step back and stay in our free space. That is why it's important to speak about it.
Yeah,
it's an awakening process.
Yeah, I would like to stay a bit longer on this topic because especially some people, they have no prior knowledge. A friend of mine did a little research on the Ahrimanic, and he wrote down some main features. You already mentioned perhaps the most important. I'm just going to read through some of these features of Ahriman that he found in his research, according to Steiner. So it's the materialism and mechanistic worldview. Ahriman promotes a purely materialistic understanding of the world, reducing everything to mechanical processes, denying spiritual realities. Number 2, intellectual coldness. Ahrimanic thinking emphasizes rigid, abstract intellectualism, divorced from human warmth and spiritual insight. 3, technological focus. There is an emphasis on technology and scientific advancement without consideration for spiritual wisdom or human values. Hardening and calcification. Physically, Ahriman's influence is said to manifest as hardening processes in the human body. And here, of course, I get to think of your book, Thomas Meyer, that we have discussed already about the COVID vaccines, the spiritual influence, how the energy healers could feel that the people would have more, they become harder and more rigid. Rigidity in thinking and social structures. Ahrimanic forces promote rigid, formulaic approaches to thought and social organization. Manipulation through fear and control. Ahriman seeks to influence humanity through fear, promoting systems of control and surveillance. Do we see that today? And opposition to individual spiritual development. Ahrimanic forces work against the cultivation of higher spiritual faculties in individuals. And there is some more, but we can leave it there. So I guess if we just take these notions, you probably have some associations.
Yeah, thank you. It brought it quite good together.
Nothing to add, yeah.
Yeah. And so this calcification, this hardening, you talk about this, Thomas, in your book, the COVID vaccines from a spiritual perspective, that it's not actually, the Ahrimanic attack is not directed towards the soul, the spirit. It cannot. It's directed towards the body. So the soul is not comfortable anymore in being in the body. So the body becomes hardened. Is that a correct way of understanding?
Yes, that's one main aspect. And that means then we are living as machines, because the soul is somewhere out of us, and it's not connected again. That is the main question: how present I am with my soul in my bodies. That's the main question.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I don't understand, though, if I am the soul, so if the soul is over there, how can I be here?
Yeah, but there is often a difference. Sometimes you can always ask how much I am present. I am full present or only a little bit. But you have to ask it, because it's possible only to live your daily life with 10% presence. It's possible, of course, and because you are not present, you did not recognize that you are not present. And
the problem is, of course, that we have to, that our soul is using whole features of our body and our invisible body. And the main problem is when something shifts like that we are not properly connected with, for example, our organs to the higher world, like our brain glands, pituitary gland, pineal gland, hypothalamus, and so, where usually spiritual impulses can come in, but when we are not anymore the master in the house, and so it means they can't provide us with impulses, what these higher beings usually do to help us in a way of leading us a bit through this difficult world. So which is a big problem, is cutting us off spiritual impulses by vaccination.
And then also the rigidity of thinking, is that also part of the Ahrimanic? Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because you can always, a good question is, how much love is in my thoughts? Is there an atmosphere of love around, atmosphere of goodwill, or is it cold? So it's a question you can ask with every thought.
Yeah.
And then you can find, oh yeah, there I am now inspired by Ahriman, and it's real. If you had a hard thought, an aggressive thought, then from the spiritual world, Ahrimanic beings are coming inside you immediately. If you really are thinking with love and with warmth, then you are connected with Christ, and then the Christ energy is coming in you. Or you can also call it in other ways, this love of the spiritual world is coming in you. And we, in our thinking, we are always connected with spiritual beings.
Mm. So just to summarize this incarnation then, how is this incarnation being made possible? Is it from beginning in the schools, the way they teach pupils about who we are, that we are just molecules and so on, and that creates sort of an empty space for this Ahrimanic force? So what is sort of the foundation of this incarnation?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there are a lot of steps. It's a complex thing. Yeah, it's education, materialistic thinking, and then on the other side, cutting off your feelings. That is quite important, and traumatizing, dissociation. That's another part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you just described. No? So we are all taught to think materialistic. So, and from the early age on, we are used to specific technologies. In the easiest example that we experience are, for example, navigation computers. And so in former times, we always knew where we are when we were driving a car. And so we just type in the address, and we are cut it off from the feeling to our surrounding. And so this is a complete Ahrimanic idea. We are all used to that, so it's completely normal. So we're not really surprised about new technologies. So this is how how the Ahrimanic ideas can become fruitful in us.
So I wanted to also talk a bit about vaccines before we go into artificial intelligence and so on. And Steiner had quite some thoughts about that. And you have talked about that, Thomas Meyer, extensively in your book about how he saw in the future. But maybe we can just begin talking about not the COVID vaccines, but vaccines in general. Did Steiner have some notions about vaccines?
Yeah, he said quite clear with every vaccine in his time. There are not so a lot of kinds of vaccines, but he said quite clear that an Ahrimanic umbrella was throwing over you, and you really have to work to overcome this Ahrimanic cover. That's one quote. He always said it spoke against vaccines.
And when looking super sensibly, we see that every illness is a being, and those beings are connecting to us, fitting as the key into a keyhole. And the keyhole are all the biographic experiences that we make. So every emotion that we ever had is still existing in our life forces body, in the etheric body, or in a soul forces body, in the astral body, giving a kind of pattern in that this illness being comes in. And then, of course, our task is to develop ourselves, to overcome our negative experience that we have, to weaken or even dissolve this old pattern that the illness being can't connect anymore. So a real healing from any illness can only happen by our own work on ourselves. So in fact, of course, it's very much simplified, but just to say, we need illnesses to develop ourselves. And the vaccination, which can be observed with every vaccination, is a forceful connection to an illness being, disregarding any biographical background, which means there's just so this being connecting, which has two effects. One effect is that they play a specific chord on the piano of the higher bodies, which is, so to say, that what an illness does. So it is weakening. It doesn't appear in the physical. So we don't become ill, but there is a weakening effect in the etheric, in the life force. And the other effect is, of course, when an illness doesn't appear anymore, there's no possibility to develop.
Mm.
So, but of course, well, this is very much simplified, and no one wants to have any illnesses like tetanus or polio, and so, but just to explain the concept of how it's super sensibly.
Yes, that's very, very interesting. I remember when I was going to Waldorf school, I began in the 1970s. I had this change a lot. We can talk about that later, but in those days, there were still some teachers who had this idea that when a child would come back after having been home when a childhood disease, perhaps in like measles, for instance, and when they came back to school, the child would have a new glimmering in the eyes, sort of. So by going through a childhood disease like measles was actually seen as a part of the spiritual process of becoming a full-fledged human being. So I mean, that's really emphasizes your point that if you take it's not only what you give a person, the vaccine, you take away an important part of this development of overcoming measles.
Yeah, of course, and you have to understand that this vaccines is a money machine for the pharmaceutical industry, because they the state said you have to take the vaccines, and so they can produce and get a lot of money. That's all. And the interesting point is it's always it's important to know normally they do not compare people without vaccines and people with vaccines and who is more healthy. They do not make such studies. Now, that is important to understand. There is always a marketing that it's healthy to get the vaccination, but they do not prove it. In reality, there are normally no studies between people who are not vaccinated and people who have taken the vaccines, and after 20 years, who is more healthy? That would be the interesting question, but they do not research the question, because in my understanding, this vaccination is mainly a money-making machine for a pharmaceutical industry.
Yes, on one level, and then on another level, this is Ahrimanic influence.
Yes.
And so this maybe it's just a hypothetical question, but do the pharmaceutical companies know this, that it's actually a sort of a spiritual warfare, or is it for them just a commercial thing? What do you think?
I think for them it's a commercial thing, and they are inspired by Ahriman, but they do not know that they are inspired by Ahriman. Because Ahriman is not coming and say, hello, I'm Ahriman, do you want to follow me? No, he is coming from behind and going into the thinking of the people, and they are inspired, of course. But I think normally without to be consciousness about it. Or?
Well, I don't know about the intention. So of the people, this is not my way of super sensible approach. But I'm tending to believe that there are good intentions to help the people out of their, of course, narrowed way of looking to the world.